Awesome. So I guess I want to ask a question to each and every single one of you. This has been quite an eclectic event by way of the diversity of perspectives that we're representing across the space ecosystem. So we have had startups inspiring us, aspirational entrepreneurs, we have VCs and investors and funds, we have talking about Mars and changing Mars to Earth version 2. We're talking about Bitcoin and sort of crypto and actual blockchain applications in space. And I know that was something you didn't dive into, but you could probably give a bit more information on. What today, for each and every one of you, has been your highlight so far?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's been, I'm in the blockchain space. I don't really interact with too many aerospace people other than we do these little tangents to the ESA or something. So it's super cool seeing this intersection and how many people are interested in the intersection itself. I mean, for me, I think it's a perfect fit. So seeing the actual size of the people here that came out and are asking questions and getting involved, yeah, to me, it's just super cool to see that the size of it alone. And that's kind of, I'm still comprehending that.
Well, I absolutely agree. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was perceived as a science fiction. Now everyone is talking about blockchain for space, which is very important. And I believe that we're at the very beginning, the inception of something great, something big, and we should be kind of kept moving. And it's very beginning and many things to be achieved, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm still, as I said, I'm a complete noob in this domain, so I'm still taking it all in. I'll probably have to think about it with a beer tonight and in my hotel room afterwards, and come back with a better answer tomorrow. But I think I like the way that all of you guys are thinking not only about the technology but also about real problems and real applications. And not only on the technical side, but also well, we had some talks about the legal aspect, but the cultural side as well, and almost at the philosophical level as well, in the way of dealing with or without the government, and that part of the discussion as well, more than the technical side even, was really interesting, I think.
I think I'm going to add that I really love the conversation regarding the legal aspect of actually going to space and who owns what and who can do what and who is guilty for what. For me, that is an eye-opener, and it's somebody who actually knows their stuff, who parsed the information for me. So that was great. But other than that, seeing the reception from the space industry and the intersection between blockchain and space, that is just amazing. So I'm really happy to see people interested from both sides to interact and to actually work together.
Okay, so my area really is just in space exploration, and when I got the invitation to come and speak here, I've got to say, but my initial reaction was, blockchain? You know, I mean, we're talking about finance, logistics, and stuff like that. You know, that doesn't really fit in with what I do. But oh my God, am I glad that I've been here today? You know, it's been for me really exciting, really interesting, and especially that this is pretty much getting in right at the beginning of this kind of activity and movement. And yeah, I can see that this is going to be a big thing in the future.
It's really interesting. Sorry, I interrupted.
You need to invest.
It's just really interesting hearing about the intersection of what we've kind of all come to experience today, because I've been knocking about in this sector for a couple of years, and it's really interesting seeing the acceleration, particularly in London, outside of the hotspots that we have around the UK, particularly in Berlin and in Bremen, where I know Magni, who is one of the co-founders of Disrupt Space. And it's so interesting because something that I'm going to put you on the spot a bit, Magni, because we want this to be open with everyone here, is something that Disrupt Space was doing about 2 years ago, was bringing together innovative space startups and aspiring entrepreneurs and putting them in a fuzzy unconference, pretty much like today, with the likes of Airbus and ESA to help deals get done. And it's really interesting because I think an outcome of what you achieved has really set the trend in the sector, where ESA have now deployed incubation centres. We now have one in the UK. We were in Estonia in November where they launched one out there. And it's really interesting seeing how this sector is really scaling up, not only in Europe, but across the world. But this audience is connecting globally. And that's the great thing about space, because it incorporates each and every one of us. Masley, please could you just wave so everyone can say hello to you at some point? Masley. Yeah, so I guess if you were looking to meet someone today in this room, or someone who you could meet with to help each and every one of you on your main outcome, I know you've sort of semi-pitched, but I want you to nail it in like one answer. Who is it that you'd like to talk to? Because sometimes not everyone in an audience is as open as maybe I am in saying, this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for. Who are you looking to meet and talk to and connect with today?
Well, I mean, we've been talking back behind stage, and also we've been interested in looking in like legal aspects, and those are the finding rockets and finding legal help are our two biggest bottlenecks, and so I think we've been finding some good help so far.
Well, for me, it's mostly finding alike minds and doing something together, bringing it to a larger scale and doing something really at a scale and together, rather than trying to build your own stuff, because we are at very early stage and we are competing against very large corporations at the moment. And I believe it's really the power in unity, doing things together.
Wait, can I just add? You should have seen how happy they were to meet each other. Like Dean and Pavlo, oh my God. Like I had to take a picture of them just because they're like, you want to send something to the moon? I can help you with that. Okay.
Yeah, for me, it's about understanding a bit better the technology, how it can help us in our business, and as well, discuss opportunities for you guys, for launches as well, but satellites, and how we help you building your infrastructure with the infrastructure that we can provide.
Is there anyone looking to build a satellite and deploy it?
Well, you are.
Outside of this panel. Jerry, how about yourself?
Okay, well, my needs are pretty simple. I need people to book me. not book a satellite. Get me to come and give a talk on some aspect of space, or to book my space workshops. Speaking of books, buy the book, right? As it says, so I don't have to carry them home. Or even to sponsor me. Okay, so I'm quite serious about this. Next year is the 50th anniversary of the first men on the moon. I'm going to be incredibly busy. I have several new presentations I'm working on. So, for example, next year is also the 500th anniversary of the start of the first circumnavigation of the world, Magellan's voyage. So I'm developing a new presentation called Around the World and Off to the Moon. So it compares Magellan's trip with that of Apollo 11. And I'm also working on being able to have a cardboard Saturn V, 1/50th scale. So that means it's over 7 feet high, that schools will assemble and keep, and so on. And other activities. If I can get sponsorship to help me with that, so that I can keep the cost down for the schools, that's the main thing. Schools' budgets are really appalling these days.
UK Space has some great funding to help with that.
Yeah, well, possibly.
Okay.
Every single time I have applied, there's always been someone else who seems to have something which is so much more worthwhile doing than my activities. And yet, what do they keep saying and have been saying for the last 6 years on BBC, on every sport thing? Get inspired. So I've said, well, why can't we use space to inspire the next generation of scientists, engineers, all the useful people that we're going to need in the future? Surely that is as important as inspiring sports. So that's the message I'm trying to pull. When I go to a school, I don't pretend for one instant that all the pupils in the classroom are going to grow up with careers in the space industry. I mean, who knows? They might be lucky. Well, I do point out that practically every career has some link to space. You know. I mean, you might be working in TV. So Sky TV, which ought to be called Space TV, they use satellites to transmit stuff. You might be a lawyer. Space law is a huge and rapidly growing area. So there's all kinds of options. And so if I can get students to be inspired and to be interested in following the STEM subjects, then to me that's job done.
It's super important because coming from the sort of the point where the intersection of tech and space comes, we don't have enough developer talent, we don't have enough engineers, and even if we doubled the number of kids going to uni to take an engineering degree, we still wouldn't fulfill the deficit that we need. And what I'm looking at solutions that we can look at, maybe getting apprenticeship training schemes to really help share talent. Are you guys lacking any particular talent or skill set that you need to maybe help you guys scale with what you're building? Is that something you're finding, or are you okay with the kind of teams as you're looking to scale and build your business?
Well, ours isn't necessarily a team. We're like more a community, and we just people pulling in from everywhere. So I mean, yeah, we can take all the knowledge we can get, but pretty much everyone just kind of jumps in and does their own thing. So yeah, if anyone wants to, they can just jump in.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to start asking you guys in the audience if you have any questions, because I think we've got the mic to throw around. Are there any immediate burning questions anyone would like to ask us?
Otherwise, we throw this.
Hello. Yeah, it's on. It's an observation. I started organising this conference about a month and a half ago, and it was a subject I knew nothing about. I love a fair bit about blockchain, but nothing about space. And I thought, this is, what is there out there? And the more I looked, the more I found that there was a hell of a lot of stuff going on between blockchain and space. And there's everything from the sort of stuff that's been talked about here through to NASA doing a debris tracking project, ESA and Airbus and Lockheed Martin doing supply chain management. They've got projects in that. They're all early stages, but they're not very well known. They're not known by the blockchain community, and they're not known by the space community. But trying to get speakers from those organizations to come and be with you today was really difficult. In a way, it's all slightly too early. I think when we run this conference again next year, which we will do, it'll be a whole different affair. I think there will be a lot more to talk about from those people. But right now, it's just kind of the objective was to make you aware of this crossover. But secondly, also to put your minds onto the much bigger picture. The much bigger picture is where Jerry was talking about. It's we have to leave this planet. Our survivability as a species now depends on it. And there are so many different parts to that. It's from what the big guys are doing with the big rockets and what Jerry's been talking about, the big missions, but also about all of you guys. The blockchain community has its part to play in incrementally building out parts of the technology we need to get there. So that's really, what I'd like to leave you with.
It's so interesting because I think everybody who's spoken today and is attending today, everyone has a different vision of why we want to look outwards. For me, and I'd love to ask you guys as well, it's not necessarily the same thing that Elon wants to do in creating there might be a Earth catastrophe that makes sure that we have a insurance policy, if you want to call it that, for the human race. I love what ESA are doing with the proposals around the Moon Village. They have a creative artist in residence who's already designing temples that depict what it could be like for a non-denominational religious human entity, showing the kind of the human stamp of what it's like as we progress in our steps as we move forward and move to the moon and a galaxy gateway or to Mars and beyond. So it's really interesting for me because I'm all about exploration. And I think it's something quite human and instinctive to want to look outwards and forwards and see what the capability of emerging technology is to enable that. And that's where I do believe that blockchain will be the foundation. And the reason why I talked about supply chain for a real world example today is, as much as that FMCG brand is looking at deploying blockchain to really build a foundation of where they want to take future supply chain, they've only just started thinking about it. So many corporate executive teams and senior leaders, as much as we are enriching ourselves and delved into this technology, so many people at that higher ranking business level are only just understanding why that technology is relevant and why they should even be considering it as a line on their budget to start investing in. And that's where the hacking world of like startups and scrappy scale-ups for me is so interesting, because we look at the MVP, the minimum viable product, to see an idea. Because let's be honest, no one's going to be talking about AI or blockchain as much as it's the buzzword out there, not for us in here. No one's just going to lay down 50 million euros or dollars or pounds to build a solution without at least testing and trialing it. So it's really important that those of us that are taking these initial steps and are really putting ourselves out there to be part of this sector that's emerging and has constantly been evolving since the 60s, technology has come to a point now where it's accelerating the timescale for us to deploy it, but a lot of the foundation work is still being done. So I just took that and riffed. I'd love to know from you guys, I keep saying you guys, I'm really sorry. Why space? What drives you? Because that's me, that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, sure. So back in the day, I grew a network called the Blockchain Education Network, where we had kids basically put Bitcoin clubs on the university campuses. And the whole idea was that you can empower an individual to take extreme initiative in their local community, and the change they created, especially when seeing them doing it in parallel with other people, was huge. Like in aggregate, it was the global revolution of the grassroots blockchain effort. And I see something very similar now, where you can use the same technology that's very accessible, and it enables participation from downloading an app on an app store. And you can apply these for these concepts from an area that normally people look at or they see on TV, some great astronaut. But now's the chance that every human can be an astronaut or can be part of these efforts in a very significant way. And so that level of access and participation really rustles my jimmies. Yeah.
Well, as far as I remember myself, I always wanted to do something space related. I believe that many of us have this gene of explorers that drives us out of our homes, out of our beds every morning. And we really want to achieve something beyond our daily life. I was in fintech before. I was running a company similar to PayPal in Eastern Europe and in Asia. Then I sold the company and I decided that I want to do something else. So I started doing blockchain and space a bit later. And for me, it's something which really kind of drives me rather than just simple financial transactions. And we should think outside of the box. When you talked about the corporates and how they use new technologies, including blockchain, is sometimes they're trying to use it for incremental innovations. They don't want to take a risk to disrupt their business models, to disrupt their lives. Well, they have shareholders, they have many things to lose, but startups or people, individuals, they are more flexible and they really are ready to take the risk. They're less constrained. And I believe that it's very important that the new blockchain movement, which had always had less constraints in the corporate world, is driven into space industry now. And I believe that we can overcome many struggles. Something which we thought was not possible will become possible. If SpaceX was able to cut cost 10 times, and blockchain-based distributed system can cut it even more.
So I've worked on several satellites. I've been involved in several satellites projects as an engineer first, and as a business developer afterwards. And so I have a bunch of hardware which is in orbit now, and that's just a feeling that is impossible to explain. That's just super cool. So why space? Because it's fucking awesome. It's just as simple as that.
Nice.
I also think that in the US, in Europe, we've also forgotten how it can drive people as well. I work with countries who are starting their space program now as well. in North Africa, in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and that's really something that they use to put themselves on the map. They are already on the map in a lot of different industries. They use space also to show to the rest of the world that they can do it and that they can be heard. Some do that with nuclear missiles, and then they invite the U.S. president. Others just decide to do it in a more peaceful way. And that's I think what's important as well. And that's we have to remind ourselves that's also the reason why it started.
I mean, for me, it's just, I always consider space cool. I mean, ever since I was a kid. And it's just the fact that you cannot actually put something in space now, for me, is just, I'm sorry, I really feel bad I don't have something in the orbit. Like, but the other thing that I've noticed is something actually more specific to the people I work with. So we're a blockchain consultancy development company. And the moment we launched this product, it was just about Swarm, just overall Swarm technology. I mean, it's interesting, it's exciting, but a lot of our people did AI. So Swarm is exciting for people who do AI. Once you add on top of it, then you say, we're going to do it with drones. They're like, oh, this is going to be so much cooler. And then you're like, oh, yeah, you know, drones are cool, but now let's do it with satellites in space. Developers actually excited to write white papers, business plans. I'm not kidding here. People get this natural excitement about space. It's something they haven't thought about that they could do, and now you're suddenly putting it in front of them like, yeah, you can actually do it. It's not that difficult. Just have the right mindset, have the right people that can help you with it, and find somebody to launch it. Done. So for me, this is the thing. Like, people get excited. It's something new again. So why not?
Yeah, build the first satellite, and then the engineers are not really interested in writing documentation again.
Actually, on the subject of documentation, Werner von Braun used to say that when the weight of the documentation equals the weight of the rocket, then it's time to launch. But I've been passionate about space since I was really young. Next week I'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of my first space talk, which I did when I was at school, when I was 14 years old. And if you ask school children, what subjects are you interested in? You know, they might say history or mathematics or so. But then you ask, what subjects are you excited about? And space. Space is the one, it just knocks them away. I get teachers say to me, I get emails, you know, so, you came to us last month and the pupils are still talking about it. You know, they're not going to forget this for a long, long time. And this is it. I mean, so the standard thing is young people are interested in two things, dinosaurs and spaceflight. So a few years ago, Comic Relief's theme for their red noses was dinosaurs. And I usually do demonstration air rocket launchings at the end of the day. And one day I was checking over stuff, refitting fins and so on, and I thought, hang on, my rocket has a red nose cone. So I contacted the schools that I was going to during the next month, which happened to be March, and Comic Relief was going on, and I said, instead of me launching the rockets, your pupils can launch them for a £2 donation to Comic Relief. And we put a dinosaur Comic Relief red nose on it. So we combined dinosaurs and spaceflight. And down the side of the rocket, I had it printed, I launched this red nose cone rocket for Comic Relief. And that first year we raised about £500. Comic Relief said they'd never heard of anybody raising money for charity by launching rockets. You know. And that's, you know, even they say, wow, this is cool. Something. And that's it. Space is cool. It excites people. I mean, when I first was really getting into this, there were actually occasionally people who asked me why I was interested in space. And that created a problem for me because I couldn't understand why they had to ask. Wasn't it obvious? You know? I mean, we're doing things we'd never done before in the entire history of mankind. No, I said, look, I don't denigrate explorers like Columbus and Magellan and Da Gama and so on. But when it comes down to the bottom line, they went from one country to another country where there were other people there. There was food to eat, air to breathe, a blue sky. They didn't leave the planet and fly across 250,000 miles of space and land on another world. I saw that happen live. I regard myself very privileged. And it's that kind of, the recreation of that experience I hope we're going to get next year. I'm part of a small group at the British Interplanetary Society looking at how the Apollo 50, as I'm referring to it, can be celebrated. And I produced a list of people, organisations, places, events that might get involved in this. And in bullet point, it runs for over 3 pages. You know, it's not just the Institute of Physics and the Royal Society and so on. Greenwich Observatory, we're hoping to have a mass picnic in the park there. But other things. I went past the BFI, IMAX, and half of it was covered in this huge advert for Costa with this huge coffee cup. And I thought, okay, let's see if we can get Costa to produce some templates that can be used in all of their shops, and you can sprinkle something over the top of your cup of coffee and you've got a lunar footprint outlined there. And there's other weird things like, have I got space news for you? And the producer of QI is very interested in doing something.
I'd love to see Helen Sharman versus Tim Peake hosting a team on Have I Got Space for You?
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah, I mean, potentially we can get these people, and you know, it could be really great. But we would pair them with a comedian who knows or is interested in space. So we've got Dara O'Brien. And there's others. In fact, anybody here who has any ideas for ways of celebrating Apollo 50, please come and see me afterwards. I'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. Does anyone else in the audience have any questions or like to share a comment? Anton.
Do I need the box?
Yep.
Then one at the back.
Touching Anton Sholopanov, Materium. Touching on some of the things which had already been said, and looking back to the opening of this conference and some of the things which Vinay Gupta said, I wonder what the panel see as the most exciting or the most important humanitarian implications of the marriage between blockchain technology and space travel and space exploration.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I thought he compared space travel before as being competitions between nations. That two nations, you know, the communist world and the capitalist world are competing to see who could be the best in space. And I really like the idea that now it's quite different. The technology exists, and now there's enough people who are capable of participating and collaborating. And in this new world, we're seeing that collaboration is a fighting force to work with. And what we can accomplish as humanity, people of all different countries, collaborating on goals that they find enthusiastic and fun to do, I think that is a paradigm which is kind of hard to comprehend as how globalizing of a force that is. If everyone on Earth is able to work on a goal together, it's not competing between each other, but rather putting all the best minds together in the biggest problems, I think that's an awesome paradigm to be seeing in the new type of space race. And when Vinay was talking about that, it triggered so many euphoria rushes.
I think I just quickly add something as well. I mean, that is the core idea. If we cooperate in space, that's how we can actually move forward. And I think this is also one of the reasons why there's actually not much regulation in this area, because you cannot, I mean, you can have private companies own it, you can have nation states up there are multiple ways, but at least how I see it and how some people to whom I've talked is if we decentralize space ownership and everybody participates with their own thing, and you create this ecosystem where everybody else can actually also participate in getting the data. You don't have the central point of ownership that is about space, because when you think of it, it should belong to all of us. So this is why I think blockchain enables.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And referring to Apollo missions, with the first landing, I was not present. I was not alive at the time yet. But for what I've been told that everyone, and I was born in the Ukraine, which was part of the Soviet Union at the time, moved to UK 15 years ago. But everyone, even in Soviet Union and in other countries, they felt that they did it as a humanity. It's not the US who landed on the moon, but humanity as a whole. And I believe even though they had that feeling, but they were never able to actually own part of it or to be part of it. And I believe that technologies like blockchain, they open models for a new economic system to be deployed, and with the industrial revolution, fourth industrial revolution, hopefully people will have more time to think about space with all the automation, and we might be able to produce something which goes beyond what we have thought is possible.
For me, it's making sure that we have equal and fair access for everyone who wants to explore space. At the moment, we know that it's been mainly pilots, engineers, scientists, astronauts that are trained. I would love to see a future that anyone, whether they grew up in a council estate in southwest London, on a farm in India, or went to Eton, or went to Cambridge, had equal and fair access to visit the moon. To have a chance to go around the Earth and see that beautiful blue dot from space. And I think that we no longer have to bind ourselves by the constructs of just Earth. And I'm not just about Earth-based thinking. I think it's so nice when you start thinking about solving problems from not just an Earth-based mindset. And if anyone's seen me on Instagram, I'm constantly asking them for me to be able to spatially tag the moon every time I take a photograph of the moon, as the moon is part of being the satellite that orbits Earth in the physical 3D space that it is. I'm going to throw it back. We had a question at the back there.
Yeah, adding to what you said about the collaboration and all of that, that's brilliant. You know, I just want to anchor it back into what blockchain and space are doing humanitarian-wise, into some of the examples that I think James gave earlier, very briefly in his slides. Things like the use of imagery, you know, multiple imagery to look at crop growth and things like that, and disaster relief photography from space. Those are, you know, really stuff that's going on right now using blockchain. And unfortunately, like I said, one of the speakers we were going to have from Cloud.io, they are using blockchain. You know, they're a long-established geodata and geoanalytics company that are now using blockchain as part of that marketplace. And a lot of their imagery that they get through their market is used for humanitarian relief. So, you know, there are real practical examples as well as all the cooperation in the future.
Hi, I had a question. I see a lot of projects and about constellations of satellites, but they're always looking inwards. Why are we not looking more outwards? Is that a reason of like physics or economics?
Economics mostly. So if you want to look outwards, there are a few things that you would be looking at. I talked briefly about the lunar project that we did with the Chinese. That's the first stepping stone in putting a constellation around the moon. For radio astronomy and looking at the dark ages of the universe. I'm not going to go into the scientific details now, but the only reason why we want to be there is use the moon as a shield between us and all the radio emission coming from the Earth. So that would be one. Observing asteroids would be another one. For instance, either to find out where they are and try to characterize them, so you can go there and mine them. Also for prevention, so in case one is heading at the Earth. But in all of these cases, the business cases are not that obvious, and there is a lot more that we can look at the Earth for civilian purposes or the other kind, and for which there are actual business cases. And that's the reason. That's where we look. I don't think it has really anything to do with the technology, because those are problems we can solve. It's mostly economics.
Thank you. I mean, it sounds super interesting to me. I think it'd be really good if we could like democratize how we can find out about these projects that other people might be interested. Like for me, I would be very interested in contributing to things looking outwards, but I have no way of even knowing about them. And maybe we're not quite at that point where you can kind of crowdfund in that way, but that sounds exciting.
Well, that could be an idea for a platform, maybe not blockchain specific, but in general, because there are quite a few people who are looking at how do we call it again? Citizen science. We launched a satellite earlier this year called PIXSAT, which the goal was to observe the transit of an exoplanet. And they made all that data available, and anybody with a simple radio could listen to the satellite, get the data, know how to look at the data, and then participate in the science. And there are quite a few of these projects that are out there. Maybe the only thing that is missing is a platform to group them and help the general public be aware of it.
Or it could be absolutely blockchain based, and it could be a DAO, and you could vote. I mean,
that's what I wanted to hear.
Well, I think this kind of discussion, and to go back to your comment, Dominic, earlier about getting the people from the space industry interested, I think that's one of the things, is we need to look at the applications and what blockchain can do rather than the technology itself. That's how you get other people in other industry interested as well, because I can imagine people at ESA and even the UK Space Agency now, although they are looking at this more and more, to us, I'll be completely blunt here, it's mostly a buzzword. We don't really understand what it is and how it can be used. So that's why if we have more use cases and real applications that are explained to us in a very simple way, because we are simple people, that would help us and you a great deal as well by bringing people from other industries in this conference.
I agree. I was actually trying to get specifically the people from ESA and Airbus who are doing the blockchain projects to come and explain it to us. But getting those people here is quite difficult. You good at catching?
So maybe a question to the panels, and first an idea. I spent 10 years of my life at Airbus, so and I'm here today to build up a blockchain startup in fintech. So I think what you're doing is exactly what needs to be done, is make the link between the industry, the governments, the ideas, the entrepreneurs. And my idea for the panel for next year is to make it even more international. We're here in London, but we should bring some Americans, to bring some Asians, some Russians, some Europeans, and would be interested to understand from the panel what you think, what would Brexit bring to this problem for the UK, because I was involved for 10 years in the European aerospace industry. I'm an entrepreneur in London for 16 years. We have now a Brexit. We have the space agencies splitting up. So maybe blockchain could reunite everybody around the new idea, and that's what we're working on with my co-founder. So be interested to have your view on that.
Well, I talked to some people at the European Space Agency, and when we talked about projects like Galileo, we've been advised to form an Irish company. So maybe, but I don't know. I mean, hopefully blockchain will be this enabler and component which can help to communicate and reunite people and across industries and across the countries as well. But it's hard to say because we are really at early stage at the moment. And obviously there are different expectations at the level of startups and level of the corporations. So if we can bridge that and we can find common grounds and how we can enhance each other, then we can really work together.
And imagine the application of smart contracts as we work to collaborate in a post-Brexit era in really working together with nations that may not necessarily be part of or just exclude the European Union. The UK obviously has been pushing its relationship with the Commonwealth countries. A lot of those are really emerging markets, and it's really important that we ensure that everybody, no matter whether it's Kenya, which actually was an ideal position to launch if you're going to the moon geographically. So we need to be thinking about geostrategic partnerships in the UK, particularly in post-Brexit. But what smart contracts and blockchain will help us to enable is tying up those dots in geographical locations to build in the projects and kind of hopefully ensure that the transparency of how those countries and institutions and individuals or entrepreneurs within those chains come together to deliver those projects. And I think if we're looking to go off Earth, that smart contract application with blockchain could be really, really interesting. And Anya, I'd love to know if you have any thoughts on that as our legal expert.
Yeah.
I put you on the spot, I'm sorry.
Quite many, actually. So one of them was that I feel like I brainwashed you all with the idea that space belongs to all mankind. Because there was a lot of people asking me when I started studying the space law, why space? Because there's so many international issues here on Earth. So why on Earth would somebody go to space? And I was dealing with the answer quite a long time. And then I came to the point when I realized that we actually have to go to space so that we gather all the information and find a solution how to tackle with the issues that we have on Earth. That's the first one. And the second one is even more interesting, actually, because it's funny how we can perceive all the outer space, including Moon, to be of all of us. But when it comes to Earth, we are not capable of this perception. So when you think of having these solutions in space, think of how these solutions are going to bring the same perceptions on Earth. And that's how you bridge usually the communities when you have small countries that are not going to be spacefaring countries ever, and all the communities that are going to be built from entrepreneurs alone. Because that's already happening on Earth, and these bridges are missing. And because of these missing bridges, we're actually facing the threats of like Trump, because there's going to be another battlefield. And when we reach to Mars, when we reach to Moon, that's just going to be another competition created. So that's my thoughts. Anybody else? Should I put somebody on spot?
I suppose related to law and what you were saying earlier about insurance. I gave a talk at Wickham Astronomical Society just last night on the threat of near-Earth asteroids. And something that I quoted was a lovely line from the great science fiction author Larry Niven. He said the dinosaurs became extinct because they didn't have a space program. He then added, if we become extinct because we don't have a space program, it'll serve us right. But I then went on to explain how plotting the orbits of asteroids, as you mentioned, we need to do that for two things. One, so that we know where they are, and we need to assay them essentially remotely, so we know which ones to go after to get useful materials. But we also want to know where they're going so that we can work out which ones may hit us in future. And the tracking of asteroids is essentially an insurance policy. You know, we spend some money in doing this, setting up tracking centres and even sending out remote craft ready to go into action to hopefully deflect something. And compare the spending of that against the cost in human lives and physical destruction of an actual impact. And that's what insurance is about. You spend a bit against the threat from something else. And so what I tell people when people say, you know, what's the point of spending money on space? I say to them, well, do you have any insurance policies? And you say, yeah, of course. I said, well, this can be looked on as our insurance policy. And frankly, if space can save the world, isn't it going to be worth it?
It's really interesting that you mentioned the insurance side of it, because there was an event I attended last year called World Space Risk Forum, and it was literally the world's insurers who insure the launch organizations. And one of the big risk factors is actually the debris, but also our insurance policy in the future as we look outwards is those defunct satellites that are lying up there, that if they are on a national register or global register, let's think internationally, then actually those are resources or that we can repurpose when we're in space and we run out of certain elements. And I think if we start thinking about solutions like that now, imagine what the collective creative power of tech and non-tech people can bring together. And I'm a big fan of STEAM because it's not just about science and technology and engineering and maths. Arts are a big part of that creative synergy. And I think bringing lots of different people, and I'm going to challenge you guys, maybe we need to have a hackathon before next year's event, or just even a half sprint, because I'm all about Scrum and like really working through ideas really quickly. Imagine what we could then like hack together and see what we build on as a community if we're all doing open access projects and accelerate each other. I think that would be really interesting. I'm just going to do a time check. How are we doing on time?
We're doing fine.
We're good? Okay.
Yeah, I've got one more person to speak after you.
Awesome.
Briefly, so where are we? 10 to 5?
Okay.
Wrap it up by 5?
Cool.
I just wanted to context what Jerry was saying about near-Earth objects impacting us. I think, from what I remember, a piece of rock the size of a house, if it lands in central London, it will effectively destroy the entire of Greater London. I think it's that sort of magnitude. Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's about the size of the object that came down over Tunguska.
Yes.
June the 30th, the end of this month, will be the 110th anniversary. So obviously I included that in my presentation yesterday. What I then showed was what would have happened if it had come down at the same angle as over London. And the area that gets destroyed reaches out to the M25. And then I put an arrow just next to that pointing to Amersham saying, "You are here."
Yeah, I mean, just making that point to say that, you know, that we do live on somewhere that's quite fragile, and whether or not we as human beings destroy our own habitat, there's a lot of stuff out there in space that really could hit us at any moment, and the devastation is massive.
Yeah.
So tracking near-Earth objects is really an important job.
And, as you said, space debris. So on a recent flight to the International Space Station, a test craft was taken up, which day before yesterday was ejected out of the airlock of the International Space Station, the largest object they've ever put out there. And this is a test unit with a net and a harpoon to try out retrieval ways of removing dead satellites and other pieces that are in orbit around the Earth. Incidentally, where was this thing made?
Okay.
We build the deployers for
Guildford.
it. We build the deployers for it. It's also a bit Dutch.
It's fantastic. Any more questions from our audience? Do we have any final thoughts from each of our panelists? Is there anything you'd like to say or wrap up with?
I believe that we should be really accelerating the pace of innovation personally and collectively, and it's a good beginning, but we shouldn't stop here, and we should continue as fast as we can.
Yeah, I mean, continuing on that, I think like when you get enough people enthusiastic about something, it creates like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the more that you guys come out to these events, the more that we have people talking about these things, it kind of just ends up happening. I mean, the ideas float around, people get inspired, and you'll be surprised the exponential pace of these things.
Yeah, let's think about applications as well, and build real stuff, real hardware that we can get excited about, and let's launch it.
Also software, and also don't keep it to yourself. Try to find partners, find people who actually like it, and maybe find a use case.
So this has been the first blockchain conference, and 50 people here today, which is a fantastic response, and all kinds of different people. And, well, the only way is up, isn't it?
I love that.
Start from the bottom, now we're here.
Yeah. So, I mean, well done to all of you, to Dominic for organising it and getting the great range of people along here. I think it's really successful.
Well, we're planning by the end of the next year. It might be delayed by 6 months.
Right.
Welcome to the space business.
And my
So next year, 50th anniversary
Yes.
of the landing on the moon. And so your strapline can be, let's look to the next 50 years in space. It's going to be so different, isn't it?
I think that's a perfect way to sum up this panel by saying exactly that. Let's look at the next 50 years and what we can achieve. Thank you, everyone.